Welcome. This is the Post Secondary Transition Podcast, where we have conversations around the ins and outs and everything in between of the transition process for families of students with disabilities. I'm one of the hosts. My name is Meghan Smallwood, and I am a public school transition coordinator. And as always, I have my co host with me.
My name is Patrick Cadigan. I am also a public school transition coordinator. All right, so it took us a while to finally get here, but we are here. As a refresh, we had started a little bit of a series, if you will, that we called Empowered Beginnings, and it walks families through the transition process as their students are going through school. So we started in freshman year, and then we did sophomore year, junior year. But now here we are. It's funny. It's still appropriate to call it Empowered Beginnings, but we're at the end. This is senior year. And when Meghan and I offline were talking about this, we decided that, again, we're going to kind of break this down, and that we have our diploma-bound friends, which is to say those students who will graduate with a high school diploma. And then we have what in where we are is considered certificate track. In other words, students who will not graduate with a diploma, but they will receive a certificate of completion. So we will start the conversation talking about our diploma-bound friends, and then we will transition to talk about our certificate track friends. But keep in mind that in many instances, a lot of what we will be discussing can be interchangeable.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Patrick, because I was just going to say sometimes you may start on one track, but it's good to be knowledgeable and informed about both of them because the end result may be a different track, which is perfectly okay depending on what your student's path is. And I'll get to it in a second, but you may realize that there's not enough time to meet all of those graduation requirements. Starting with that student-centered transition plan, which we work so hard through high school to come up with some interests and areas they want to explore to make those final decisions about what they want to do when they grow up after they graduate. So having some decisions about that post-secondary education, if that's where they're going, vocational training, employment, or whatever other transition goal they may have, you definitely want your student to start looking at them if they haven't yet, enrolling in them, and kind of coming up with an idea of where they want to go. Like I mentioned with those credits, you want to be checking in with student services and your school's guidance counselor to see if your student is on track to meet the requirements and if there's anything that needs to be adjusted. I know we've had discussions before about it may take a student more than 4 years to complete graduation requirements. And by law, the student's allowed to stay in the school system till 21. So it's okay if it takes 5 years or 6 years. It's individualized. But sometimes it does happen where, that gap is closing and the student is approaching 21 and they still have too many credits in order to get that diploma. So they look at another track, and like Patrick said, it's interchangeable, and you just head down that one.
Yep. So we have finalizing that student-centered transition plan, coordinating with student services. And the next thing that we're going to throw out there is you want to be participating in the transition meeting or meetings as your student is moving through.
And it's so important that the student is present for these meetings, but most importantly, that last meeting, so that they're hearing about all this information that we've tried to explain to them as they get ready to leave us and go into that post-secondary world. They're aware of their accommodations. They know what kind of supports they have in place. That way they can actually apply them to their post-secondary goals and be prepared to advocate for themselves. You want to make sure that they are involved and you're involved in transition activities and programs that will help prepare them. If there's job fairs being offered, which I know in our county we have, you want to attend any kind of workshop for vocational training, independent light living skills. I feel like senior year, a lot of times I'll hear from parents, they really still need to work on those executive functioning skills. Looking at resources for that to help prepare them for the next step is a huge thing as well.
And it goes without saying, and I know that this came up in our last discussion, because what we're going to throw out there, completing financial aid applications, but that is probably one of the more stressful things and something that parents are thinking about constantly. But again, senior year, this is definitely a good time to focus on that.
Yeah, and I feel like it even overwhelms me just hearing that word. And I don't have a child going to college or post-secondary level yet, but just that word FAFSA. Make sure they're using their resources. I know our student services are a great help with that. There's a number of workshops offered, webinars, a whole bunch of people there that can help you through if you have any questions, because it is daunting. Make sure to explore scholarships, any grants or loans that might be available to specifically for students with disabilities. There are a number of them out there, and they definitely should be looked at.
One of the other things that's coming up constantly, requesting accommodations for standardized tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that goes back to that necessary documentation, which the student will need when they leave us too. But it is important to get those in place in a timely manner so that they have them to take these tests. And it's one less thing they have to worry about.
And I know that this is going to sound like common sense, but again, this is with everything that's just coming out at families or coming to the families, coming to the students, making sure the credits are being done, blah, blah, blah. Make sure to complete those college applications.
Make sure you have all the necessary parts, the transcripts, the letters of recommendation. Find out if the college you're applying to requires an essay. Make sure you have them all. Find out when your deadlines are. I know Student Services does a great job of posting them. So just be aware.
And being aware, one of the other things, again, that it ties in very strongly with this, and Megan's already mentioned it before, but applying for scholarships and grants. And part of that is also being aware of what scholarships and what grants are out there and available.
Yeah, and make sure to stay up on all the graduation ceremonies. I mean, this is a big deal. You've achieved a lot. You want to be able to celebrate and enjoy it. So pay attention to the number of school emails that are coming out about ordering cap and gown, attending rehearsals, any kind of arrangements. I know that they start early. So just being aware of that information.
And playing off of, again, because I'm literally in the middle of this as we are having this discussion, being aware of and visiting with disability support service offices at any of the colleges that you are looking at or considering.
That's something I always talk to my juniors when I meet with them and they start saying that they're visiting colleges. I always tell them while you're on campus, just be aware of where the Disability Support Services office is. If you have the time and you want to stop in or see if you can just make an appointment to meet with someone, it's great to visit and just see what they can tell you, what they have to offer.
Now, one thing though that I will throw out there, diverging a little bit from the college discussion, there are students who choose to forego college, right? That they want to just get immediate employment. So, one of the things that we always throw out there, and this goes back to some of the teachers that we work with in our school system, is preparing for interviews, resume preparation, things of that nature.
Yeah, and I know within our school system, that is covered. It's one of the requirements for graduation to participate in something where they do build a resume and do a mock interview. But there are additional classes that can be taken. There are different agencies or nonprofits out there that offer opportunities to practice this as well. It's definitely a great thing to look into a little bit before you actually have to do it for the real time.
And again, with everything that's coming at you, one of the things that we have always communicated in all three of these conversations is adding to your support network. This is not necessarily something that you can do on your own, although it probably feels like you do it on your own sometimes, but add to that support network of yours.
Yeah, and kind of similarly to that, you want to make sure that you're in touch with those community resources as well. If you are accessing support services like vocational rehabilitation agencies, you want to make sure you have your applications complete, checking in with them about anything, steps moving forward that need to be done, as well as accessing any of their counseling and academic assistance that offerings that they have.
Yeah. So you have adding to your support network, finalizing those community resources. Big thing, Megan, you already brought it up before, but I want to throw it out there again. Continuing to build self-advocacy skills.
Oh my gosh, that's the number one thing I think that we stress, especially in those senior meetings. Like the colleges don't want to hear from mom and dad. They just want the check to pay for the classes. They want to hear from the student advocating for what they need and what they're going to use as accommodations to access their classes there.
One of the things, and again, Megan, you kind of alluded to this, but I do want to throw out there to take a moment and celebrate, no matter how small or big, celebrate the achievements.
No matter how long it took, either. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. You did it. That's
Yeah.
the important part. You stuck with it.
I was just thinking about this the other day, how challenging, how difficult high school can be. Now, don't get me
Mm.
wrong, as somebody who went through undergrad and a master's course, but just that, I don't know, just thinking back to all those expectations. I suppose I've been thinking about it quite a bit because my son is now at the middle school level and he is having a transition of his own from, elementary to middle and exploring and discovering all the differences to that. But man, when I just think back to high school, sometimes I'm like, ooh,
I was thinking of that too, because my son will be making that transition next year to middle school, and I'm like, ugh. And I think of the high schoolers too. Like I see all the activities that they're a part of and the great things they're doing, and I just look at them and I'm like, my goodness, the management skills you have to pull this off with the workload I know that they all have now, it's impressive. I think everyone that gets through high school deserves that recognition.
yes, indeed. Not finally, but one of the things that we have continued to advocate for, speak to, creating and keeping what we refer to as an at-home folder. That folder that has copies of past or current and even past IEPs if you need them, related assessments that include psychological, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Just if it is an assessment and it was done, you're going to want to hold on to it. All that relevant information.
So important, especially if you are going to be using disability support services at the college level. They will be looking for those assessments.
It's almost like we've broken down senior year over the course of an entire year.
In a matter of minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, we've got it. Everything is fine. Okay.
Yeah.
But like we said, now what we're going to do is we're going to transition. That was covering for our diploma-bound friends, but now let's talk about our certificate track friends, or the friends of ours who are not going to graduate with a diploma. One of the first things as you were preparing for, how do you want to introduce this, Megan? I never know how to broach this topic.
I think, well, and we've talked a lot about this, but I think as you approach that final year, that exit year before your young adult leaves the school system, we know that there's a lot of things that we're going to mention that have been ongoing. But it's basically the time to kind of wrap it all up and get ready for that next step. So your coordinator of community services, your DDA coordinator, that's someone that you've been talking to hopefully more regularly than you had in the past. But now is the time that you're really going to want to be hearing from them and meeting with them, because they really help to understand the needs of your student after exit and the services that they could access.
Yeah, and it's funny because now that you mention it, we have had so many discussions that sometimes I even forget about those things that we talked. And we have had a lengthy discussion about exit year and what that can look like. So check out the link in the show notes because we're going to want to make sure that you can go back and also listen to that valuable discussion. The next thing we're going to throw out there, and again, this is one of those things. I'm right in the middle of this with one of my families, applying for supplemental security income.
Yep, and it's SSI, not SSDI, because that has come up a number of times lately. I know it's confusing and it seems a little backwards, but SSI is what your individual will be eligible for at 18. SSDI is for someone who had been working and became disabled and can no longer work. So SSI is the focus, and that's that financial help from the government that an individual, once they turn 18, that has a long-term disability can receive. And the money, and we've gone into this in a number of other episodes, but it can help provide money for basic needs, just like food, rent, clothing, just to make sure that those essential expenses are paid for.
If you belong to or you follow us on our Facebook page, it's interesting how in parallel, sometimes things happen and that kind of jogs our memory. And we're like, hey, we should probably mention that. And so we bring it up on our Facebook page. Check out the link in the show notes. And we recently had posted on Facebook about the SSI conversation that we have had in the past, because again, this is something that we're like actively going through with our families as it's being done. So
Yeah.
hence the reason, if you see a post on Facebook, most likely something happened that jogged our memory.
So at this time, you really want to be visiting those adult agencies and different providers that are available that you could potentially use the DDA funding for after your individual leaves the school system. I know we've talked about that before as well, and we have a number of resources available on our website for them. And I think a list of questions that you can ask the different providers based off of what you're looking for.
Yeah, it is a good, practical working list of those questions that you can ask. And again, this goes without saying because we have mentioned before about our home folder, but gathering those school records, this is essential, especially when it comes to DD, developmental disabilities, or VR services, if that's something that you're utilizing, but you are going to need those records for eligibility determinations.
Yeah, those school records, this is really the time. And hopefully there's been some planning ahead of time, and back mapping done by the school to help you with that. Because especially for DDA's purposes, they will really want a psychological evaluation within the last 3 years to help while you apply for the waiver. Additional evaluations are helpful, like the education, speech, occupational therapy, or physical therapy. As long, in addition, a behavior plan or a functional behavioral assessment, those can help too when you are doing all of the paperwork for the waiver. But that psychological evaluation is very, very important.
One of the other things, and again, this is something that we've had a discussion around, so we are going to throw this out there, but it comes with a big asterisk. Considering medical power of attorney for your student, and this kind of delves into like guardianship or those alternatives to guardianship. So in no way, we've said it before, this is in no way legal advice. However, it is something to think about and consider.
Yeah, we really have gone into a lot of detail about this, and I know we had some good conversations about the alternatives that are available. But it's definitely something, if you haven't thought of yet, to start thinking about. And I think advice from many people we've talked to is to look at the least restrictive option before heading to the most restrictive option, which would be guardianship. But it's based off of what works best for your family and what fits your needs the best. So we have a bunch of resources, again, on our website for both types. So make sure that if you haven't considered it yet, it's something that you are considering.
And again, something that we've talked about before, but we're going to reiterate again. As you are preparing that exit, building into and adding to that support network.
Yeah, that circle of support is so key. I mean, I know when I talk to parents and I try to talk to them about future planning, it's an overwhelming and scary topic to talk about what happens when, you're not here anymore and your child with a disability still is, and you're the one who's been doing everything for them. So, as scary as it is, as much of other things you have on your plate at the moment, it is something to keep in the back of your mind, especially as you're making these decisions for those future plans. Keep those people around you, close to you, in the loop, ask for their advice, just make them aware of what's going on.
Again, it's so weird that, we basically come up with this list of things that we want people to do, and it in no way addresses the totality or the enormity of what it is that's happening. But boom, there you go.
Yeah. I
There's your
mean,
list.
in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, there's your list. Now, We will throw out there that we've made many references to going back to our website at www.postsecondary-transition.com for both of these lists for our certificate track friends and for our diploma bound friends. If you go to the website on the homepage at the very top, you will see links to buttons for home, what's in an IEP, and where we found these lists is in our where to start button. So if you just hover over that, it's going to give you a secondary menu. You'll see our start here. We have certificate track, diploma track, and it even includes transition tools or tools that you will use along that journey. So again, go to the website, check it out. This can be super useful.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, there we finally finished out. So
Yay.
that's really good. And then our next discussion, we've been building towards this for a while. We're going to kind of change lanes a little bit. We had a really good conversation with a creator of content on YouTube, and he gave us just some practical working advice for those friends and students who are thinking that may be something that they might want to consider. So
yeah, it's like a career spotlight.
Yeah, and it was a really good conversation. I was glad that we were able to have it. So, all right, Miss Meghan, I think that we can sign this one off.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, everyone.
You'll find all the links to the information from our conversations in our show notes. We would love for the information from this and all our other discussions to reach as many families as possible, and we need your help to do that. You can find our conversations at www.p2transition.com. Like, follow, and share out the podcast. Our conversations are posted to all the major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and that's just naming a few. So please share and share often.
Please also check out our YouTube channel. Now that we've done some of the legwork for you by curating videos of topics that revolve around transition, we have playlists for guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, ABLE accounts, and there's more to come. So please be sure to subscribe there as well. And then finally, check out our website, which is full of information and links to resources around the transition process. So open your web browser of choice and surf to www.postsecondary-transition.com. And we thank you so much for the time you spent with us and look forward to talking again soon.